Hello and welcome to a very special one-on-one here on A Different View. It's a World Cup special, you could say. I'm joined by the last man to take Scotland to a World Cup finals, Craig Brown. How are you doing, Craig? You okay?
Yes, I'm okay, thanks. Looking forward to the World Cup, but it's not the same without Scotland involved.
No, it isn't the same. And what do you make of the World Cup being in Qatar? Obviously, a lot's been made about that. And how much of a difference do you think it will make with the tournament being mid-season?
Well, I think it made quite a big difference, actually, because I think a lot of the clubs are not too happy about it. The nations aren't all that happy because usually it was at the end of a season and it was comfortable then, but it's a bit uncomfortable now with players coming from all over the place and, league programmes being disrupted domestically. So from that point of view, it'll not be good. And I think it'll be better in Qatar in the winter because I was in Qatar doing commentary for Al Jazeera television 2 World Cups ago. And I'll tell you, the heat was unbearable over in Doha. So, and we were indoors and we had air conditioning. Now, I know I visited the stadium, the main stadium there, and it has air conditioning, but I think there could be problems with the heat, even although it's the winter time.
Yeah, there was a lot made about that. And do you think the European nations will maybe benefit more and countries will benefit more with being mid-season? Countries like England, do you think they'll have more of a chance because the players are playing and there's not that stop-start nature, if you like?
Yeah, I think that's one advantage, the fact that it's mid-season for the players, so it's not the end of a season. So they'll be relatively fresh and raring to go, I think, the English and the Welsh teams from here. But I genuinely believe the heat will still be an important factor over there. And for that reason, I think it could be a South American team that will be the best that will win the tournament, a Brazil or an Argentina, because I think it'll be difficult for the European teams, although it's not quite as hot as it would be in the summer.
Yeah, we'll come back into the World Cup later on, but I want to focus on your career, if that's okay. And before we get into the coaching side of things, Craig, I want to touch on your playing career. Obviously, it was cut short by a knee injury, but you played a good amount of time at Dundee. And am I right in saying you were coached by the great man Bill Shankly?
I know, I was coached by Bob Shankly.
Bob Shankly, his brother.
Bob was Bill's brother. In fact, Bob won the league in Scotland and got to the semi-final of the European Cup before his brother Bill did. And Bill was at Liverpool, a bigger club. Yeah. So Bob Shankly was the older brother, actually, but he was very, very good manager.
Did they have similarities to Bill then in his nature?
Very similar, very similar. He was very rough and ready, broadly spoken, from Ayrshire. They spoke the same dialect, and they had, I don't know if he meant it, but he had a good wee sense of humour, Bob Shankly. He would put me at the end of the front row in the team photo, which they took in the summer in July when at the start of the season. They would take the team photo and they would position us all. Good players get in the middle, Alan Gilzine and Ian Muir and these guys. And I'm waiting, am I going to get into this photo? And they would point to the seat at the end of the front row and he would say, "You sit down there." He always called me Christ Craig, you sit down there. And they said, a pair of scissors will get rid of you. Well, you thought, I'm not going to be here when the team photo's in the calendar at Christmas. But that was him trying to get you motivated. A pair of scissors will get rid of you. And you knew that you had to perform to keep in your place in the team.
And I remember hearing you talk about your playing style, and you said that your aggression was your biggest asset. Am I right in saying that? And Bob, would say to you, what's 11, 1 away from 11, 10?
That's right.
Get them down to 10 as quick as possible.
Yeah, that's what he would say. There were no substitutes, remember, in those days. So the manager would say to me, "Can you count, son? 1 for 11. And I was a crawler. I would say, "Yes, boss, 10. Get them to 10 as quick as possible." And he wanted you to do it fairly but hard. That was what he says. But it was hard to injure a player deliberately, and I never did that. But I thought my one major asset when I was a player was aggression. I was supposed to be a half tackler and a fighter and get in trouble all the time.
Do you think that affected players getting injuries in back in those days? The fact that there was no substitutes. Do you think that?
No, I don't. I genuinely don't think so. But what happened was this: if you got an injury, they kept you on the pitch and you to limp about. Now that wasn't good for the long-term healing of the injury. Yeah. So if you got an injury in the first half, a knee injury, say, and you limped about, and he would send you out for the second half. We'd put you would, if you were a midfield player or a defender, they'd put you in the wing out the road, but you were still on the pitch and you were still trying to take part in the game. Now, in many cases, it was a mistake because the injury was getting aggravated because you were playing. And if you'd been taken off right away and a substitute come on, well, you'd get a chance to heal better.
Yeah, and you think about it now, the amount of times wingers get kicked. I don't know if that's a smart decision to send people out in the wing.
No, I don't know. That's a good point you made, Stephen.
But obviously, the knee injury cuts your career short. Then you find yourself in PE teaching. How do you get there from your first coaching role at Motherwell as a coach there? How does that come about?
Well, when I was a young lad, I was a good boy player, and an international under-18 player, and I played with my claim to fame is I played with the two most famous Scottish footballers, I think, and the two most famous have won the European Cup. One is a manager, and one is a player. Now the one as a player was Billy McNeill, and he won the European Cup for Celtic as the player, the captain, and then Alec Ferguson was the manager of Manchester United and won the European Cup. Now, I was lucky. I played in the Scotland under-18 team 1 year with Billy and the next year with Alec. So I felt that, I was doing okay. I was in at that level of player, not quite their level, but I was like an international youth player. So I went from there, signed for Rangers, which with hindsight was foolish because, I wasn't good enough to get into anywhere near their team, and I got an injury. And Rangers, would you believe, at that time did not have a full-time physiotherapist. So my treatment was very poor for my injury. And I say that advisedly, but they didn't have a physio, so I didn't get proper treatment. And I limped about for a long while at Ibrox. Then I got a loan move to Dundee, and the doctor said, how long have you this? I said, 18 months. He said, well, that is negligence, and he was quite critical, and so was I. But anyway, I went to Dundee. Now, while I was at Rangers, I was a part-time player. I was a student. I was a PE student. So that gave me a qualification. So when I finished playing, my knee gave up on me. I was still a PE teacher, and I'd also trained as a primary teacher as well, so I could have a classroom job or a job in the gym. That's why how I get into teaching when I finished playing.
And did you take anything that you would adapt to the teaching and your coaching?
Well, I think so. I think it's the same skill you're trying to get them to improve their performance in the gym and the swimming pool and in the games field if you're a PE teacher. And that was what you did with the football team. You did the same. And a very similar, I would think, mentality when you're working with adults in a football team and you're working with, youths, adolescent boys coming on to want to be football players, and you wanted them to play well. So similar. I had just standards you set are the standards you get. Whatever you want from within reason, without asking to do things out with their ability. Whatever you want, you insist on getting. And if you're insistent enough in getting it, there's a fair chance of them performing to your standard, the standard you want. So that was my philosophy.
Yeah, and I look at some of the people you've worked with, and one that you worked with very early on at Motherwell, Willie McLean, I'm right in saying, yeah? The McLeans, the best family for me, coaching wise, the best coaches that you look at, they produced Jim, Tommy, and Willie as well. How do you reflect on that squad that he's had at Motherwell at the time?
Well, Well, I think, to go back to the McLean family, I think for years I would say the best footballing family in Scotland, the most knowledgeable footballing family in Scotland was the McLean family, both as players and as managers. They were all good players. They were all excellent managers. Jim got the best credit at Dundee United for his success there, winning the league with Dundee United, which was a terrific achievement. But Willie was his older brother, and he used to phone Willie regularly for advice. And Willie was very, very good. And I would listen to Willie talking to Jim, and I would pick up from what he was saying as well. And Jim would ask him, we're playing Hearts on Saturday. How did you play against them? That kind of thing. And Willie would say, have you got a pencil there? And he would write down the advice he got from Willie. Then he'd say, what about training? And Willie said, hey, Craig will tell you what we did this morning. And again, I would say draw a penalty box or 2 penalty boxes, and then I would tell him what we did in the training. So I think Willie was the main man of the McLean. Well, he was the main man in the family. He was the oldest brother, but Jim became the famous manager, and Tommy was probably the best player of the three. Played at a high level at Rangers and at Kilmarnock, but he too was a very fine manager at Motherwell. And I think way back I was at an event at Motherwell where the supporters voted for the best ever Motherwell manager, and Tommy McLean got that award. Yeah. So that was a major award. So a brilliantly knowledgeable family. So I was the assistant manager at Motherwell when I finished playing, and Willie was the manager. And to our great credit, I remember one season I was there. I was only there a short time, but 3 seasons. But one season, second one, we beat Celtic in the Scottish Cup at Fir Park with Kenny Dalglish playing and Jock Stein, the manager. And then in the next round, or the round before rather, we beat St Mirren in the Cup, and the manager was Alec Ferguson. So we were good enough at Motherwell. Willie McLean was good enough to beat the two best managers Scotland's ever had, Alec Ferguson and Jock Stein, and we beat them at club level in the Scottish Cup.
And of course, he's had a great strike partnership. I'm a Motherwell supporter myself, Craig, that Motherwell fans still talk about to this day, Willie Pettigrew and Bobby Graham.
Bobby Graham, yeah.
Bobby Graham's my papa's cousin, so yes. So
Is he?
Oh, aye. So yes,
he's a fantastic player from Liverpool. We signed Bobby. And he laid the ball on the plate for Willie Pettigrew.
Was that how they worked together then? Was it very much, you think of the great partnerships, I think in my time I watched Andy Cole and Dwight York at Man United, they had a great partnership there, but was it very much like that with Willie and Bobby? Did they work off each other?
Exactly, ideal. Bobby's passing was unbelievable, Bobby Graham, and Willie Pettigrew could time his run. He stayed onside, just on the shoulder of the centre half. And Bobby, he could guarantee Bobby would put a weighted pass in the space behind the centre half, and Willie Pettigrew was right onto it. And he could shoot either foot, particularly right foot, but he was very, very good. Then we had a winger, we had Peter Maranello for a spell.
Going to go into that in a minute. He was my dad's favourite player, actually, Peter Maranello.
Well, he was a star. And you know how we get Maranello? Your dad will be interested here. He came from Portsmouth, because Portsmouth stole the Motherwell manager, Ian St John. And they took him away down to Portsmouth, and they couldn't afford to pay him. And they said to us, he had a couple of, in fact, 2 or 3 years of his contract. We were due 30,000, and they kept saying that, like, sorry, we can't pay yet. We know we owe you. We know we owe you. Then they said, come and take any player you want from Portsmouth. So I was sent down to look at them a couple of times. And I said to Willie McLean, Willie Pettigrew, he's your man for if they'll give us any player. So he'd been at Arsenal and gone to Portsmouth, and we got him in exchange for Ian St John, the manager, which is quite uncommon, a player for a manager.
Yeah, you said Willie Pettigrew there, but I'm sure you meant Peter Maranello.
Sorry, Peter Maranello.
Aye. No, that's right. But what was it about Peter that stood out then when you went down?
Well, his ability, his skill, his wonderful talent. He could go past players. He could beat a man, no problem. And he had a good bit of pace, and his delivery of the ball into the box was terrific. Particularly from the right side. He was a flyer, actually. He went flying up that wing. The kind of glamour winger you would love to see. And the fans liked to see him when he was in full flow, and he would go past any fullback. They all tried to kick him, of course, but he was elusive, and he put great balls into the box for Pettigrew and Graham.
I remember my dad coached with Willie Pettigrew actually at Motherwell when Willie was coaching the under 15s and 17s. And Willie would always talk about this one game, the 1976 semi-final against Rangers. He feels like that was one that got away. We lost narrowly 3-2. Do you have any memories of that game?
Yes, I do. I think we always accuse winning goal of being offside.
Yeah.
You know, I think a long ball down the pitch, and we think that Derek Johnson was offside when they went through in that goal, but we were heartbroken to lose that cup tie because we did enough, we felt, to beat Rangers. And I think it was the previous year we'd beaten Celtic in the cup. Now there was a chance to beat Rangers, but the linesman didn't give offside when we felt he should have, and we played them very, very well. Now, I got to say that Motherwell team that we had in the mid-70s was a brilliant team.
Stuart Rennie, Joe Walk.
That's right. Rennie, Watson and Walk. Then it was the other Watson. And then it was McLaren and McVie and Peter Miller. Miller. And then, of course, your forwards, you've just been talking about them. We'll get Marinella, we had also Vic Davidson, who was a very good player up front. And we had another striker called John Goldthorpe. You might remember John. Mm-hmm. He was a different type of striker from Pettigrew, but he's a very good striker as well. So, I mean, then we had Ian Taylor in the left wing, a boy signed from Aberdeen. So it was a good team.
I think it's a sign of how good that team was, the fact that somebody at my age, 28 years of age, is still hearing about that team and how good it was. So I think that's a marker of how good it was.
Well, but you know, Ian St John was the manager before Willie McLean, and he set the groundwork. You know, he did well at Motherwell in his short time as the manager, and then of course away he went for a big salary, huge salary. We hear this huge salary at Portsmouth, 8,000 a year.
Wow!
That was in those days. That was what he left to go to get. That was reputed anyway. I don't know for sure, but you know, why he's getting 8,000 a year? That's some wage. And away he went, and he left a big squad of good players at Fir Park for Willie McLean to deal with.
From there, you end up going to take a manager's job at Clyde. What prompted that decision, and how do you reflect on your time there within the second division in your first season? Yeah, well,
what got me to Clyde was my friendship with Billy McNeil, who I played with in the Scotland under-18 team. And Billy was the Clyde manager, and Billy got the job at Aberdeen, and he recommended me to the Clyde chairman, and the chairman accepted his advice and phoned me. And I wasn't in a contract at Motherwell because I was part-time. Although I was assistant manager, I was part-time because I was working in a college of education. Now, the college year is 32 weeks. You know, you do 11 and 10, and that's your 3 semesters in your college. So they didn't start until the end of September, October. So that was perfect for football because your pre-season training starts in June, July, and August and September. Now, I could do 4 months full-time football. Yeah. And then I became a part-time assistant manager. By that time, the players should have been trained and fit, and Willie would maintain the fitness himself. So he took the full training squad at Motherwell without any assistance when I was back at the college. And I did the evening, I did the part-timers at night. And I thought it was a very good arrangement we had. But why was I telling you all that? I think it was to say to you that when Clyde came for me, it was part-time only. And I had a full-time job at the College of Education. So it was a very good. And I was my own boss. And I went to Clyde in 1978. I went to Clyde, having been at Motherwell since 75. So I had 3 years there. I went to Clyde, and I loved the job. They were in the second division. The league structure was different then, first and second division just. So Clyde were in the second division, and a good team I inherited from Billy McNeil, and Billy went to Aberdeen. Then after a wee while he stole my best player, Steve Archibald. He took him away from Clyde to Aberdeen and only gave us 25,000 for him. So that was our fault. We should have had higher demands on our player than the 25,000 we got.
And I remember you telling a story about, it's weird because Sheffield's just down the road from me, and to hear this story that I'm about to draw to, Andy Roxburgh used to bring coaches down a lot. And he brought a certain Italian coach down to Sheffield by the name of Fabio Capello. It's crazy to me to think that Fabio Capello's been in Rutherglen.
I came to watch Andy. He took him to watch the Old Firm in the morning. I think he was at Rangers in the morning, Celtic in the afternoon, and he said he had a restricted time in Scotland. He said, "Here's a part-time outfit." So he phoned me and he said, "Could you bring Capello?" Well, I remember he had a beautiful camel coat with a fur collar, and the ball came to him while he was standing watching, and he flicked it up and he kicked it in there and he caught it in the back of his neck and the fur collar with a camel coat. And his collar was all muddy when he left, but he was smiling, he was a happy guy. And it was an honour, I suppose, to have Capello at the training at Sheffield Stadium.
Could you imagine if they had social media about in those days? If that would have been caught on camera?
That'd have been a story.
That would go on. But no, I want to move away from Clyde because, as I say, we do have a World Cup coming up. And you worked alongside Sir Alex Ferguson at the Mexico World Cup. Could you see at the time he was going to go on to be one of the greatest managers the game has ever seen? He'd obviously had great success at Aberdeen at that point.
Well,
but then, could you see him moving on to Manchester United and doing what he done? Was there something about Sir Alex even at that point that stood out?
Well, obviously it was outstanding, but you know, he phoned me and this was the conversation. I was working in the College of Education and I get the call at lunchtime. It was in the morning, in the mid-morning break. And the girl from the office said, "There's a man on the phone for you." He says, "You have to phone him back." And I said, "Who is it?" He says, "She says it's Alex Ferguson." And I thought, this is McCoist winding me up. I thought, this is Alex McCoist. So I went at lunch, and when she gave me a number, it was an Aberdeen number. So I phoned him. And this is what he said: "Brun, how would you like the holiday of a lifetime?" I said, "That sounds all right. Where are we going?" He says, "Mexico." He says, "I have to take the team. You know that one, since sadly Jock Stein died, they've asked me to take the team and I'm getting my staff put together. And I would like my coaching staff to be Walter Smith, yourself, and Archie Knox." I said, "Well, that's great." He says, "We'll have a great time. We'll enjoy it, but we won't let the games, 3 games to play, we won't let these games interfere with our enjoyment." He said. So I said, "Very good, we'll go." So that was how I got started with the SFA. I went to Mexico with the Scottish team with Alec, and he was only Alec then. He became Sir Alec. And while he was over there, he was offered a couple of good jobs in England, but he turned them down and he said, I'm committed to Aberdeen. And he went back to Aberdeen. And then in September, I think Gordon Strachan recommended him to Martin Edwards, the boss at Manchester United. And in September, he got the Manchester United job. So it all happened quite quickly for Alec. And you could tell, you asked me, did you think he would be a good man? Well, I knew he'd be a good manager before he even went to Aberdeen, because he'd been brilliant at St Mirren. He'd been very good at East Stirling. He'd been brilliant at St Mirren. He was hugely successful at Aberdeen, fantastic at Aberdeen, the record he's got. And yet, it wasn't certain when he went to Manchester United for the first 6 months, in particular, when he really had a hard time. But he survived the first 6 months and then he just took off from there, and the rest history.
It just goes to show you, I think that's something that's lost in the game these days, is giving a manager time.
Yes,
He
example.
He was on the verge of getting the sack if he didn't win the FA Cup. There was
You're right,
banners out in Nottingham Forest game.
I've got to say to you, Stephen, I'm not trying to be patronising, but your knowledge is terrific. You know, and you know, to pick up on things like that, that he was really under severe pressure, and I know that because his assistant, his colleague was Archie Knox, and Archie was my colleague, and Archie, you know, tells me all the stories from the old days at Manchester United, and you're absolutely spot on. He was under severe pressure had he not won that cup tie, and I think that changed his whole career.
Well, they often say that diamonds are formed under pressure, and I don't think that the saying's ever truer than when you look at Alex Ferguson's career when it comes to that.
Yeah, exactly.
So from there, obviously, the Mexico World Cup, you then go on to coach the youth teams, taking the under-16s to the final of the FIFA Under-16 World Championships, then in '92, the under-21s to the semis of the Euros. Would that then have been the same group of players, am I right in saying, Craig?
No.
But the time, no, I just wasn't sure about the gap. So
there wasn't a big enough gap in time to be the same group of players. But you know, it's very nice to say that. But when I went to the SFA, I went as the assistant manager to Andy Roxburgh, and I was asked to take charge of some of the youth, and my full team. My agreed contractual team when I went to the SFA was I wanted a team. I didn't want to be the assistant. And they said, we'll give you the under-21 team. So my under-21 team, I had in my contract said sole charge of the under-21 team. And that was a delight to me because it was enjoyable. Then Ross Matthew had the youth teams, the under-18, under-16. Now, for some reason, Ernie Walker, who was the chief executive of the secretary, they called him then, Ernie Walker said to me, you're taking the under-16 team, Craig. I said, he says, they've got to be successful because the World Cup, FIFA World Cup is in Scotland. And the success of the tournament depends on the success of the Scottish team. So they must be successful. So he said to me, anything you want to make them successful? I said, yes, I would like friendly matches, as many as we can organise. And I'd like every one of these boys to be told to come to Largs, to the coaching course as what we call runners. They would take part in the exercises and the coaches would coach them. And I said that would keep them going and get me to know them over the summer. So that's the only Scottish team that's ever been in a World Cup final, that team, and that under-16 team. And part of the reason is that we got them, really. And I would go into their bedroom at night and I had this thing about stomach because the trainer at Dundee said, if your stomach's good, you're all good. So he used to lie us in the back, in our back, and we'd have to hands behind the head like this, you know, and your feet, hands, shoulders, and feet, raise, Lord, raise, Lord. We did 80 a day, minimum, of those trunk curls. Now, and we had stomachs like washing boards. We were the fittest team without doubt when Dundee won the league. And I had this fitness thing. So these young laddies came a year before this World Cup final, and we had them at Largs for the duration of the coaching courses. And I went round their rooms at night and laid them on their back and said, praise Lord, and gave them their stomach exercises. But that wasn't the reason for the success. They were good players. They were very willing to be organised the way you wanted. And we got to the World Cup final in Scotland. But the best result was the semi-final. We beat Portugal. Carlos Queiroz was the coach, and we beat Portugal. And they had Figo in their team, and we beat them in the semi-final. And then it was penalty kicks after extra time. We failed in the final, which would have meant that maybe we could have won a World Cup with Scotland if we'd been able to win the penalty shootout. But then I went with the under-20 team a couple of years later to Chile, and we had a brilliant under-20 team, and we got to the quarter-final of the World Championship, the FIFA World Cup. And then, as you correctly said, from your research, your knowledge, the under-21s were in the semi-final of the European Cup with them, and we had a very good under-21 team. And to be in the semi-final of Europe was particularly good. And we had a couple of all-ticket matches at Aberdeen on the way there. So my experience with the youths was great, and the teams were good, and quite a number of the under-21 team came into the national team. Guys like Tommy Boyd, and Paul Lambert, and guys like that we had in the under-21 team, and then they came into the national team when I got the job.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Do you think the fact that you coached these players helped you when you did get the job eventually?
I think so, maybe. I don't know. I was lucky to get the job. I didn't think for a minute I would get the job. But, the big names are all mentioned, the Graham Souness's and the Gordon Strachan's at that time. And I thought, well, I'll not get it. But because I'd done well enough with the under-21s and with the youths, the SFA maybe took the cheap option and they gave me the job. But, I was honoured. If you're asked to take the Scotland job, you can't even hesitate to think, wait a minute, I've not managed in the Premier League or anything like that. I've just managed at club level, at a lower level. But I didn't stop to think that way. I said, yes, I'll be happy to take it. And I was lucky to get it.
I think you're doing yourself a wee bit of a disservice. Well, it might have looked like a cheap option at the time, but I think as you go on, certainly was an inspired appointment. We go on to qualify for Euro 96, and we look at the group there. We've got Holland, Switzerland and England. Obviously the big focus being on the England game, but yes, you look at the other games. We won against Switzerland and we were very, very unlucky against the Dutch as well.
Yes.
How do you reflect on that tournament?
Well, the first thing was I thought it was very, very commendable to get there, because I was told by Ernie Walker, who was the boss at the SFA, the European Championship in England, we've got to be there. That's how he put it. We've got to be. And then a couple of years later, the same in France with the World Cup. You couldn't get near our big major tournaments. This one here we're coming to at the moment is Qatar. Well, that's quite a bit away and it's a different climate altogether. But England's the same climate and France wasn't too much different. So I was told we must get there. And we were fortunate from the group we got there. And I've got to go back and say that prior to that, Andy Roxburgh, and people don't give him the credit that he's due, because he got us to the European Championship in Sweden. And he got there when only 8 teams qualified. 8. Now, last year when Steve Clarke he did a great job, he got us there. But 24 teams qualified, so it should be a bit easier with 24 than it is with 8. So Andy got us there. Now, when I had qualified for England for Euro 96, 16 teams qualified. And we played 10 qualifying games, Stephen. And in the 10 qualifying games, we lost only 3 goals, which was a very good qualification record. And that took us to the tournament in England. And you're right, we had that difficult group. And the most difficult game was the England one, obviously. And we regret the penalty miss, I think. Would have made it, if we'd scored with that penalty, it might have made a big difference.
Yeah, because we were on top at that point, weren't we? We were really coming back into the game. The ball famously moves as Gary McAllister goes to hit it, and then Gaza goes up and produces a bit of magic at the other end. Sometimes you just got to hold your hands up and just say, "Well, we've been done by a bit of magic there." But
again, you're proving your knowledge. Terrific.
So, as I say, quite a tough group there, Craig, with Switzerland, Holland and England. What were your ambitions going into the tournament? Obviously, Scotland hadn't and still haven't got out of a group stage at a major finals since. Did you have any optimism going into that tournament that you could get out of the group?
Well, I had optimism because of the qualification record. The fact that with the 2 best goalkeepers in Europe, I thought at the time, we had Gorham and Leighton, or Leighton and Gorham, depending. I've got to call them alphabetically or I get into trouble, But I chose Gorham for the tournament because he was red hot. His eye was in him. Tommy Burns, the Celtic manager, kept saying, Gorham himself they won the league for Rangers. You know, now Gorham was with brilliant goalkeepers. We had a back three we played, Calderwood, Henry and Boyd, and they were invincible. I'm telling you, you never get a better back three anywhere than these three. They had everything that you wanted about to complement each other. You know, one brilliant there, one a great tackler, the other the fastest defender in the game was Tommy Boyd. So I mean, we had a wonderful setup, and I went to England with that team full of confidence, thinking that, you know, we've got a difficult group, but I think we can survive and get there. But unfortunately, England we missed the penalty, and England got the marvellous goal from Gascoigne. But I think we did the country proud, and the people were happy with their performances.
Yeah, and then David Seaman obviously letting a goal in there to do his qualification. I'm joking.
That was a heartbreak.
So close, but not quite. So we move on to the World Cup qualifiers for that. And there's you know what I'm going to ask you about? Everybody talks about it, the infamous one team in Tallinn.
Yeah.
Was that just a bit of a shambles from start to finish, that trip, or did you see what happened coming?
It was a shambles from the you see what we were doing the night before. We were training on the pitch, which you're allowed to do. If it's a European club match or an international, you're allowed to train on the match venue the same time as the kickoff the day before. So we went the night before to train there, and while we were training, we were taking some corner kicks and that. And I think it was Andy Gorham says to me, I can't see that ball. You know, it's getting caught in these lights. And the floodlights at the back of the goal were temporary lights in the back of a lorry. And he couldn't see the ball. And when the ball was going crossed in. So the match delegate was there, French guy. And I said to him, would you come and look at this? And I said, this is not acceptable. He says, no, I agree with you. So I said, what are we going to do? I said, you can't play here, that's for sure, but under these lights. So he said, turn up tomorrow in the afternoon and we'll play in daylight. And I thought that was a good idea. I save us get away home. And then, so he says, come and we'll play in daylight and everything will be okay. So when we turned up the next afternoon, the manager of Estonia had decided he wasn't going to turn up in the afternoon. I think he was a bit put out because we didn't accept the lights. Well, I don't know his reason. Peter Torterson, I think his name, something like that was his name.
I remember.
And he objected to that. So his team didn't turn up. We turned up. And that's when the chant went, there's only one team in Tallinn.
And then obviously the famous pictures of the fans on the pitch after that.
That's right. We were told if you turn up and you do everything right, and the referee's there as well, if you do everything and conform to the rule, you'll get the 3 points. So we did that, but then we didn't get the 3 points. They had a meeting. Now there are about 12 countries in Eastern Europe and they all vote together. So they all voted that the game had to be replayed. And so we had to go to Monaco to replay the game in Monte Carlo. And, you know, it wasn't hugely successful, I'm going to say, because we only got a draw in the replayed game. But that's what happened in Estonia. I've got to tell you a wee funny one. And when we were playing in Monaco, I went out to have a walk round in the morning round the harbour, the marina. And I went with Wally McDougall, who was the chief security man of the SFA, ex-police superintendent. So Wally and I are walking around the Tartan Army boys. How's it going, Craig? How's it going, Wally? Wally said, are you guys behaving? Aye, they're behaving. Look at these boats, this one says to Wally. Wally says, look, son, they're not boats, they're yachts, very expensive yachts in this harbour, this marina in Monte Carlo. And he points at one, he says, see that one over there, son? It belongs to the Aga Khan. The boy says, aye, my ma's got one of these cookers. I like that one. The Aga Khan. So the Tartan Army is full of great humour in my experience. And they've got a line for everything.
And we then go on to the group that we had there. We had Sweden, Latvia, and Austria. Latvia was a good side at the time as well. They were tough opposition.
Yes.
But am I right in saying it was Paul Gallagher that got the goal that secured this qualification? Right.
Kevin Gallagher.
Kevin Gallagher, sorry. I don't know whether I got Paul.
Kevin,
Kevin.
Kevin
Played for Blackburn at the time.
Yes, that's right. Kevin was a very good striker at Blackburn, yes. And I think I'm trying to remember, quite honestly, but he had a very, when we were in the qualifying group, Kevin had an excellent run, a scoring run. I think he scored 5 goals, or 4 or 5 goals in the qualifying in the group. And he was electric. He was quick and very knowledgeable. His game awareness is the word I would describe, and I think it was instinctive and also taught to him by Jim McLean at the United before he went to Blackburn. So he scored winning goals. Then
obviously you're faced with the challenge of preparing for the World Cup. Of course, there's one starting just this weekend. Craig, what goes into preparing for the World Cup? What sort of things were you doing in between to prepare the team? Kind of where we're going to stay?
That's right. I had to go to France several times, several weekends, to try and get an appropriate hotel. And after 3 weekends there, visiting so many hotels, we decided on one in Saint-Remy in Provence. And it was a perfect location, the hotel. And we wanted some teams like to make it normal, and they put them in a hotel where there are other holidaymakers. You know, a lot of teams like that, like the Danish team did that. We, for example, we wanted a hotel of our own so that we could impose some discipline if need be. But we had a lovely hotel, and it was an ideal. What it didn't have was a gym, but we managed to get Techno Gym to equip a gym in the hotel for us for the duration of the tournament, because every player has his own private, personal fitness regime. You know, and a guy like John Collins, when you look at his stomach, you'll realise that he's quite. I used to say, "You're a bit psychedelic about your fitness," you know, and he said, "Oh, I've got to be fit."
Still like that. Still like that, isn't he?
Sorry.
He's still like that, isn't he? His fitness.
Oh, he likes his physique, you know. But they're all like that, you know, and they feed off each other. So we got gym equipment, and there was a pool there. There was excellent food and very good rooms, so we were in a good position in Provence. But it took 3 visits to France to find that place, and it was in a village where you could let the boys. It was far enough away from the mainstream that not too many of the Tartan Army came there, like very few, if any, so that they could walk about the village and not be hassled by the locals or by the Tartan Army. And it was more of a natural environment than some where they had. Well, when we went to play the first game, we stayed in Paris. That was, you had to say to them, "We're not going out," because you could get out there and get lost or find somewhere better than a hotel to go.
Yep. But obviously, we're given the honour of opening the World Cup against Brazil.
Yeah,
we were so unlucky in that game, weren't we? I mean, look at the way we lost. It was so unlucky. But just, I want to talk about what were your tactics for that game, getting into that game, because it would have been very easy to crumble in that stage, and I thought we actually did ourselves really well. And I watched the World Cup documentary, in fact, the one that he's did going to France. I thought it was really good insight. And he seemed to work a lot on set pieces before the first game. Was that something that he's targeted?
Yes, we did that, but the other thing we worked a lot on was defending set pieces, and we had very good defensive provision at corners and free kicks. And the main thing that I had to do, I watched Brazil playing quite a bit before we played them, and I had a very lucky contact because their best player was Ronaldo, the striker. Not the current Ronaldo at Manchester United, but the Ronaldo, the big, strong striker Ronaldo. He was their best player. So I phoned one of his former managers, Bobby Robson, and I said, "How do we handle Ronaldo And he says, you don't. I said, oh, come on, Bobby, tell me. He says, he's the best striker I have ever come across in my career. He says, I've had Caretta, I've had Lineker, I've had Lineker, I've had top strikers in my career, but none of them anything like as good as Ronaldo. And I said, well, how do we stop him? He says, do we man mark him? No, he'll easily get rid of a marker. He'll roll round the marker. Do we put somebody behind the marker? No, that'll not work. I said, well, what is the answer? And he told me the answer is stop him getting the ball. In other words, look, analyse the Brazilian fixtures up until you play them, and look at who passes the ball to him, and make sure that that person who passes it to him doesn't get the chance to do that. Yeah. So I did that. I watched 9 games, 7 on the tape and 2 in the flesh. I went to see them twice, and I saw them on the video, and the passes that he got came from Cafu, the right back mainly. So what we did was we marked Cafu rather than marking Ronaldo, and we put a man to stop Cafu getting the ball to Ronaldo. Now, you're saying, what were the tactics? That was the first basic tactic.
To let him get the ball.
The ball does not get to Ronaldo. And Christian Daly was the man that was delegated to make sure he was up there left side, so make sure the right back doesn't get the ball to. So, I mean, that's an oversimplification, but you know, the boys knew that to keep the ball away from the big Ronaldo boy.
Yeah, we then go on to Norway, and they put the dressing rooms in a different postcode for that stadium. It was miles away from the pitch.
I like that.
But no, we create chance after equalising against Norway. We had a good few chances towards the end.
Yeah.
Did you feel then, having drawn with Norway going into the Morocco game, that we had a good chance of going through?
Yes, I did. I thought we had a chance anyway. We had at least a 50% chance of going through. And we did have, and we did enough to confirm that I was right. But we lost the game now against Morocco, and we lost the game by 3-0. And every other statistic in the game, every other one, apart from the score, which is the most important one, of course, but the amount of possession, the number of shots, the number of corners, the number of free kicks, everything was in our favour. And that, I mean, people don't believe that. And I say, I'm telling you, I've got the FIFA technical report. The official report will tell you that even with 10 men in the second half, when Burley gets sent off, we still had more possession than they had, and we still had more shots on goal. But yet we lost the game, so we can't. I mean, you just hold up your hand and you say we lost the game. So I think I'm an idiot when I keep trying to defend the game. And you know, I kind of disagreed with Archie McPherson, who used the word humiliation in his book. I said, where was the humiliation if you watched the game? The result sounded humiliating, and to be fair, that's true. When you lose 3-0, that's not clever. But if you look at the game and you know the game of football, and you've got any analytical capacity, you'll see that we had more of everything than they had. And I mean, I've got them. I can send you them, the stats from that game, and they're quite revealing. But you've just got to hold up your hand and say, well, we're put out of the World Cup, we're dumped.
Yeah.
You know, and the Daily Record had 3 goals, pictures of three goals, and then they had 3 pictures of the hotel. One was the swimming pool, one was the dining room with a lavish cake stand and everything, and the other was one of the bedrooms. Well, the bedrooms were luxurious, you know. And the headline was in the Daily Record, I think it was, we gave them this, and that's the hotel.
The hotel, and they gave us
the pool, the food, the mountain of food that was at the dining table. We gave them this, and they gave us this, and the other side of the page was 3 goals going in. You know, so I mean, you get quite hurt when you're criticised when I think it was a bit harsh. That's all I'll say.
And obviously, it's been 24 years now since the last day, the last manager to do it, and the last squad to do it. Why do you think it's been so long? Because I look at the game against Ukraine, the playoff. I know there's a war going on, and we had to postpone the game. I concede that we did the right thing, but I think if that game was played in March and we were mid-season, I think we'd be looking at going to Qatar, doesn't it? Do you agree with that? I don't think we're too far away from
exactly. At that time, I think our team is still doing well, but at that time we're doing very, very well. Steve Clarke's an excellent manager, and they had the team going brilliantly. And I was so optimistic for the game against Ukraine. But unfortunately, it didn't work out for us. So, we've got to admit that, the standard in world football is exceptional compared with, league football, club football. And I do think that we were desperately unfortunate with two things. One, the timing, and two, the opposition. The opposition was good, far better than people understood. We didn't think Ukraine would be as good as they were, but they were excellent.
I think when you look at other European nations, sorry to interject there, Craig, I think the big difference for me is composure in the final third.
Yes.
It's decision making in the final third that often lets us down. We're very good back to the middle, but it's just that final ball sometimes middle to front that seems to let us down. They're a lot more technical other European sides, but I think we're starting to see more of that now. I look at the way that we played against Turkey, although we lost the game. I thought we played the game with a real bravery the other night, and there was a couple of times that we could have had a few tap-ins. So it's signs that I'm still seeing the squad improving. Yeah,
well, I thought the performance against Turkey was very good, and the goal that John McGinn scored was exceptional. That was a fabulous goal. Now, I think he's got 15 goals already from midfield, and that is
same as James McFadden.
What?
The same as James McFadden. He's got the same amount of goals as James McFadden now.
Yeah, well, McFadden was a forward player now. McGinn's a midfield player, so I genuinely think that we've got a very good team, and the age is good. They're young, and he's introducing a couple of young boys that I know well from Aberdeen, just easing them in, Ferguson and Ramsey. And they'll be in there quite soon. So I know quite well. I don't know quite a number of them. I know the Aberdeen contingent. The boys like me, Ryan Fraser and McKenna, and Kenny McLean played at Aberdeen. So there's 5 of them in that group last night whom I know from my time at Aberdeen, and they're all good young lads.
And never going to move on. Do you remember what you were doing 23 years ago today, Craig?
No, I don't. But I'm told
we played a game at Wembley in a playoff against England.
Did we? That somebody told me, there's one for you. Somebody told me the text saying it was 29 years ago today. You got appointed the Scotland manager full time.
So there you go. There you go, 29 since you got the job, and 23 since that game, which was the first Scotland game I remember watching, was those 2 games against England. That's the first games that I was young enough to remember. Real optimism going into the game at Hampden, and Paul Scholes comes up with 2 great strikes. But what I really remember from that game at Wembley, Craig, we peppered them. We absolutely peppered them. And Dave Seaman's had probably the game of his career, save after save. That it still sticks a wee bit in my throat. That how do you reflect on that? Because I really feel that was an opportunity missed.
Yeah, it was. Oh, it was a great opportunity. Now, the main man in that game, the best player in the park, was the youngest, and that was Barry Ferguson in midfield. Now, the England midfield contained Beckham, Scholes, Redknapp, and Ince. Now, these are 4 world-class players in their midfield. we had a young boy called Ferguson in midfield, and he controlled the game, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely brilliant.
Dictated it.
And we had very, very good, well, we had a very good team, provision throughout the team. But I think the way if you see some shots of some video of that game, he dominates the whole show. And we were very unfortunate, there's no doubt, but hard luck stories don't win you tournaments. So we're going to admit that England get through, but I think very, very fortunate.
And then obviously we go to the World Cup qualifiers in 2002, and it's very unlucky, a 2-2 draw at home to Belgium. It means that we then can't qualify. You then make the decision to leave the post as Scotland manager. What prompted that decision? Why did you feel like that was time? It was time because it'd been, am I right in saying, you've been involved in the setup for 9 years at that point?
Yes. Well, I'd been the manager for 8 and a bit years, but I'd been 15 years with SFA.
15 years with SFA.
I was with the national team 15 years as the assistant and then the manager. What prompted me was a couple of things. One, I genuinely felt that the press were getting fed up with me. Oh, here he is again, same old story. And also, I think maybe the players too could have done with a fresh manager. Now, I think also they might have sacked me. I don't know, because we didn't qualify for the next tournament. Although it was a close shave, and that Bill, we were 2 up against Belgium and then lost, drew 2-2. And that was a heartbreak. That one, particularly against a very good team, Belgium. So I just made up my mind and told the players the day before. So no, I told the players after told the staff the day before the game that I'm finishing after the game, win, lose or draw. Well, we won the game. And I told the players after it, and then I told the press after it that I think my time is up. I think, a freshness is due for the national team. And I'm convinced that the fans, the players, everybody are fed up with this guy Brown, and I think he'd be better just and I was actually going to retire. That was my intention. And I did retire from football. And then I get an offer to go to Preston. And, twice I've thought I'm finished, then I get an offer to go somewhere. When I finished it, I was down in England, I was at Derby with, I finished at Derby with Billy Davis. And when Billy got the sack at Derby, I went with him because I was the director of football, or the football consultant, they called me there. A nice title. It's a great title that you don't get the blame. Football consultant. Anyway, Billy resigned and I went with him. And I thought, that's me finished again. So twice I've retired, and then I got offered a job at Motherwell.
Yep, I was going to ask you about that. As you say, you had the technical job at Derby, and then you come back to my club, Motherwell, and we were in a period at Jim Gannon where we had a good squad, but we just weren't quite getting the results. So what made you come back? What made you come to Motherwell, and why did you take that job again?
Oh, I think it was, I was flattered that somebody wanted me, I suppose, and particularly Motherwell, because when I was there, although I'm a Hamilton boy, and we always used to thump Dale High and Our Ladies High, we didn't have any bother with them when I was at Hamilton Academy. But no, I'm a boy from Hamilton, and you're not supposed to like Motherwell. But I don't know why I had this feeling always for Motherwell. I used to go over and see them, cross that bridge to go to Motherwell. So when Motherwell asked me, and I knew it was Bill Dickey, I knew him from my time with the SFA, and he was the chairman. And he only asked me to come to help out. They didn't ask me to come and take the job. So I just came to help out, and they said, well, you need to bring your staff if you want, because Jim Gannon's taken his coach away with him, whatever that was, I don't know. Anyway, that gave me the chance to invite Archie Knox with me. And, we loved it. You're saying they had quite a good team. They had a good team, but they hadn't won a game for 7 games.
Yeah,
I think it was. And when we went in, we brought the old experienced guys back today's
Yeah, because they
manager.
weren't getting the game. The likes
That's
of
right,
Craig
they
and
were bombed.
Lasley, Hamill, they're all bummed.
Hamill and Craig and Lasley, and these guys were out of the picture. So I knew they were very good players. So whenever we put them back in, results I think we went quite a long unbeaten run. And I think it was just the introduction of the old boys that thought they were bombed. And then somebody shows faith in them and says, come on, you're the guys that's going to rescue this club. And they didn't half rescue the club because the club played very well.
Yeah,
and
we almost qualified for Europe. And we
did qualify for Europe.
We did qualify for Europe, sorry. But we almost got forfeit against Hibs. I was going to say that. I was going to go on to the Hibs game.
Aye.
What are your memories of that 6 each?
Well, he's a very nice guy that scored the goal. He still keeps in touch with me. He texts me now and again. Lucas Jukovic, he scored the goal. But my memory of that game was after the game been asked, how come that was such a big score? And I said, well, that was easy. Archie Knox was coaching the defence and I was coaching the forwards. I was winding them up, and of course Archie was listening. But I don't know why it was such a high scoring game, but the one thing that I always remember is some people said some of the Motherwell fans left when it was 6-2. I said, but very few, because most of the Motherwell fans stayed, and the Motherwell fans stayed behind their team. And the reason we managed to get a draw and get back to 6 each was because the support did not desert us. Now, some of the moaners did, there's no doubt. They photographed one or two guys during the game leaving the ground when it was 6-2.
I stayed.
But you stayed, right? Well, you're exonerated. You can be excused. You stayed, I'm sure you did. But some of them left, and I thought that was terrible them leaving. But for those who stayed, they saw a great finale to the game, didn't they? They saw that wonderful goal from Jukovic. And we actually missed a penalty, or we would have won the game.
Ross Forbes misses a penalty, we would have won the game. And then, as you rightly say, I don't know why, because I've got up my notes here, but then going to Europe. And again, I spoke to you about missed opportunities with Scotland. We play against Odense in the playoff. I mean, they go down to, I believe they had 10 men in the second leg, and we just can't get over the line, Craig. It's like Jamie Murphy misses a penalty.
I left to go to Aberdeen, but I've been at Aberdeen there since I left Motherwell. That team, and here's an interesting thing: Aberdeen have qualified 6 seasons in a row for Europe, and they never got as far as the playoff. Now, we at Motherwell, before I came to Aberdeen, we were in the playoff at Motherwell, and it was Odense, you're right, and it was a heartbreak to lose that game, and I'm trying to. I think Rosford missed the penalty. We were a bit careless in a couple of situations to lose goals, but we should never have lost that game, and that would have put us into the quarter final.
Yep. Last couple of questions, Craig. Just obviously, you mentioned there you leave Motherwell to go to Aberdeen in December. What prompted the decision to go to Aberdeen? Was it just too good an offer for you to turn down to go to a club like Aberdeen? Or?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I get no more salary, no more money from Aberdeen than I got from Motherwell.
Right, okay.
My money was the very same. So it wasn't, I didn't go because it was a big offer of, financial reward. I went for two reasons. One, because I didn't have a contract at Motherwell. And I was offered a contract after we did quite well. And I said to Leanne Dempster, the chief executive, I said, Leanne, if you change one paragraph there, I'll be disposed to sign that. And there was a paragraph which said I was in charge of football matters, but not from under 20 down, because the under 20 coach, who's a very good coach called Gordon Young, Gordon had signed a contract giving him full control of every under 20 player at Motherwell. Now, I said, I can't be the manager of Motherwell and not have control over some of the under-20s. I've got to control all the football operation and be in charge.
Surely the youth team is there to provide a platform with the first team, so the manager should have that.
Yeah, but Gordon Young was very good with the youth team and with under-20. He was, in fact, I would say not just very good, he was brilliant. And he coached these boys brilliantly. But if, for example, I wanted them, and say he left and another guy came in and I didn't get on with him, the other guy gets that same contract. I want a boy for a cup tie with the first team, and he's got a cup tie with the under. He can overrule me. Now that was crazy. The prospect of that. So I said to Leanne, I said, if you change that paragraph, that bit about not having the full control of the under-20s as well as the senior players, I'll be disposed to say that we were not arguing or discussing over talking over money or anything like that. So I never got a new contract put in front of me. You know, it was just left. So I was working with no contract. So when Aberdeen phoned me and said, "Are you in contract?" If I had been in contract and I said no, and I'm not even talking to you, because I wouldn't break a contract. Yeah. I'm convinced I would not do that. So when I hadn't a contract and I was given the chance to go to Aberdeen, and of course, you know, Alec Ferguson phoned me and Archie Knox saying, "Oh, Aberdeen's some club that's the potential up there is much greater than it is at Motherwell." But I was comfortable and I was happy at Motherwell. But then everybody was saying, "Oh, you can't say no to Aberdeen. That's a big club and what have you, you know." So I went to Aberdeen and I resigned at Motherwell. But you know, I don't regret going to Aberdeen because it is a super club and it's you know, that's a big city, and everybody in Aberdeen, apart from the old firm renegades up there who support Celtic Rangers. No, and everybody else supports you.
I appreciate the insight. Sorry, Craig, we have 5 minutes left on this Zoom call, so just got to try and speed it up a wee bit. Last couple of questions. Obviously, there's been a big fiasco with Cristiano Ronaldo at the minute, and coming out and speaking about Manchester United. I know that you're not in a position to speak for anybody else, but how do you think Sir Alex would deal with a situation like this? Can you see him getting back in at Old Trafford, or do you think that's his career?
Who is this? Ronaldo?
Ronaldo.
Well, I don't know the total. You know, we're talking just from watching the media and not from knowing the insight. But the one thing, I just feel if Sir Alex was the manager, there was such respect. Ronaldo respected him greatly. Well, I get the impression from what he says and his attitude, he doesn't respect the current manager and maybe a couple that he's had since Sir Alex. So that my outside looking in would indicate that I've always thought Ronaldo's an honourable guy and he's a conscientious guy, but when he behaves, if he walks out and causes any kind of bother like that, I've got to change my opinion of him. But you know, my opinion is based on how he reacted with the top manager on the planet, Sir Alex Ferguson, and therefore I think it's only fair that that people should be fair to everyone here, and by that I mean I don't think for 1 minute that a player should who's in a huge contract should be in any way disruptive in a football club, and if he's being disruptive, well, that's not good. But it's not been, my impression of him over the years has always been of a guy who's a really conscientious professional footballer. I don't think he changes too easily. So if he's changed, there must be really good reasons for his attitude changing. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you on. I hope you've enjoyed watching this version of the one-on-one podcast here on The Different View. Please do leave a like, share and subscribe if you've joined this interview. Craig, thanks again, and
thank you.
All the best. Hope you enjoy the World Cup.
Thank you very much.